That's right. Okay, so we have some time for questions, discussion, comments, suggestions. Yes.
I got a list. I'll try to keep it brief and not too long. First of all, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for fighting the good fight, and thank you for mentioning the mentally ill and the intellectually disabled and the problems we're facing there, and thank you for mentioning sterilization, because they're still sterilizing us.
Yes.
They are taking our children, they are sterilizing us. There's a program in Missouri that might help with that, which I can bring up later. But I suppose my two primary questions for us to focus on economics, that's why we're here. And the first question is, because you brought up unions, with the overall issue of the poverty, is there any focus on trying to roll back right to work in certain states? Because when we've got unions, some things are better. That's question number one. And then the other question is, with the universal income for females and child care providers, I recognize that women are the focus, yes. However, what do you say to people who say, why aren't you going for universal basic income for everybody? Because that will fix everything? Or is the thought process, if we get the women taken care of first, the rest of society will see, oh yeah, this is helpful, and then maybe we can push universal income across the board?
Why does it have to be either or?
I don't think it
Because, you know, that's the thing I think we need to raise with people, because everybody should have a right to live, you know, healthcare, housing, etc. What we don't want to have remain hidden is the more than $21 trillion that caregiving, mothers and other caregivers are contributing to society. Because what's happening right now is, because they're not counting that work, where we want child care, help with elderly dependents, clean water, anything, they treat us like we're charity cases. Like, well, this is just something, you know, out of charity that you're getting. And what's hidden behind that charity is the fact, if you look at the UN statistics coming, data coming from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and other places, there's a tremendous economic value that we are producing with free work. Okay, that the Wall Street barons are getting, and all the rest of those thieves, the banksters are getting, but we're not getting. So welfare is looked at like a charity, child care is looked at like a charity, meals only, you know, all this stuff are just charities, because you all are not producing anything. Well, we're producing practically everything. Because first of all, we're having the children, producing the entire labor force, reproducing the entire labor force. So the basic income, fine, but we want a living wage for mothers and other caregivers.
Who always get left out.
Who always gets left out. Marin is right, because the moment you just say, well, that, you know, we know who's going to be left out. Not only the mothers and the caregiver, and the ones of color, starting to, and they are an increasing push for the right to work states, because you also asked about that. And we think that a living wage for mothers and other caregivers is a springboard for pay equity.
You know, they have, in Michigan, they stuck in right to work. We have been fighting that for a long time.
They've been trying in Missouri for quite some time.
And they're gonna try to get it in. And you know, they are collaborating with one another to get rid of what they don't need, because what they want and constantly want is still the opportunity to make profits for their benefit. I'm going to say this is, and that is, in one little area of California alone, they produce enough food for the world. The problem is that the technology is not publicly owned. And it should be producing for people to have a better life. So, you know, if they can produce for the world, why we got people starving out here? Why poverty is on the increase? Because that's not they want it all for themselves. And they running over each other and trying to do it. So yeah, right to work is being pushed in other areas.
I want to address just a little bit. One of the reasons for the notion of paying just the caregivers is because it's already happening in all European countries. All European countries, every child from the day they're born, they get a check. Even in Canada, you get a check, no applications, no eligibility. Rich people, poor people. So there's no reason to fight against it because it's not a poor people's program. But of course, we have no zero-income children in any of the European countries, whereas we have 11 million here. And as far as the work, right to work thing, the Fight for 15 is another poor people's movement.
Yes, it
Fight
is.
for $15 an hour.
Yeah.
They are including that issue in their movement. And I forgot to mention that one of the things we do is we publish a 56-page Mother's publication that reports on all these different movements, resistance in the movements, and how you can get involved in any of these movements. Because there's a massive amount of movements now against the wars on the poor. I have a few copies of these in the back, but you can also subscribe. We'll mail it to your house. No ads, no corporate money, no government money. So this is actually 56 pages of news.
Okay.
Good question.
Yes.
Another question.
This sister here, and then you had a question. 1, 2, and I think I saw a hand over here, 3.
Thanks so much for this conversation today. And a couple of things that I'm thinking about is if you wound up in 77 in the situation that's similar today, how do we move forward and make this part of it? Because I think we all grow up in a bubble. It's our own bubble, wherever it is, whether it's on the wealthy part of town or not, and whether it's educated or not, or black or brown or white. And so I have to say that I came to this conference. I teach in a community college. I'm not an academic. I say that all the time because I teach and I don't produce a lot of research. I try to read. I don't produce any research. So I came here to just figure out how to help my students who are all working class, mostly poor students trying to figure out how to go to college and how to educate themselves. And I see a lot of these issues. I've seen the institution that I work at that's supposed to be an institution for higher education have to open a food bank, have to open clothing centers, because a women's center, a vet center, because the needs are way beyond higher education. Sometimes I think, I teach government and I'm like, that's the last thing we need to be thinking about when I have a student walk into my office with a baby and she's saying she can't get childcare for that baby, can she bring it to class? So I deal with things sometimes a lot and sometimes very little, but I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, okay, how do we then make this work? Because we can't keep battling each other as women. We know it's a women, all these things are a woman's issue, and so we've got to link these together, and I'm trying to figure out how to help be part of that. And as I'm listening to you guys, I'm thinking, oh no, we're where we were in 77 and 2017, and especially when
a lot, okay? But I'm formerly battered, formerly homeless, raised in the projects of Pittsburgh. Housing, 3 kids, prison family come from. But what I've noticed is that we're dying as social justice activists. And very seldom do we talk about poverty and trauma, poverty and illness, and how we don't take care of ourselves. So what I do is radical self-care as a social justice activist, because I almost died. My girlfriend growing up just died Saturday doing poverty work in Pittsburgh. She never left the housing project. I left. Wanda's dead. Because our last phone call, I was saying, girl, you got to take care of yourself. You got to eat right, you got to move, you got to do some stress reduction, you got to do all of that. So after 13 surgeries, after dealing with the medical system, after dealing with my history of almost getting sterilized, but I was an aware 16-year-old, when he said, well, we have to do something to you, they only do it to old women. But who already had their kid. I didn't have any children. So something told me to leave that room. But I'm so concerned about how we want to take this. I don't want to have poor people just figure out how to struggle. I don't use the word struggle anymore. I want them to have abundance. I think that we're being blessed by the insanity in DC. I think it's a real blessing that things are being cut, that they're doing things that are hurting us even more. Because I want to ask the poor woman, because I was on the welfare, what are you going to do if you never get any food stamps anymore? When our people don't know, when there's a bag of seeds there to grow the food, what are you going to do if you don't have medical care? I'm not looking for that. I just want us to know how trauma interfaces with poverty work.
Sister, thank you so much. The sister just reminded me that there is a workshop that's coming into this room very shortly. We just have a few minutes. So if you have some questions, there were a few other hands that were up. Please, let's do that and respond as quickly as we can, okay? Because we don't want to infringe on somebody else's time. Is that okay?
Okay.
Was somebody else had a hand up over here?
My question was asked.
Your question was asked. Was there anybody else or that wanted to say anything or ask a question? All right.
You're not answering?
Yes. Let's get all them first.
I just quickly wanted to say one thing that we don't often talk about is the returns on investment that welfare and other social programs bring to children and to families. We know that providing health care to children can return up to $5 in investments and savings for every dollar invested. We know that the earned income tax credit, while there are still some challenges because not everyone has access to work or can work because of their family, that allows children to have better education outcomes, health outcomes, reductions in engagement with the criminal justice system. It allows them to go to college more often. And so it really does, welfare adds value to our society in more ways than one. And so thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yeah, and any of that data that you have, if you could put it down and email it to us. We got a mail. Did we pass around the mailing list? It's on its way now. Please, we have a mailing list if you want to, with a checkoff for the Poor People's Campaign, for the water stuff in Detroit, for anti-poverty work. So please don't leave here without, signing up and letting us know what you're interested in. Okay, and also be sure to sign the petitions. And on your way out, I just want to mention that in academic setting. So those of you who are in academia, women's studies, sex, race, and class. This is an anthology. It has a lot of our work in it. The perspective of winning, because we're about winning, by the way. It's true that we still have problems, but we've gained something, some of which I talked about. Alrighty. A selection of writings from 1952 to 2011. I would suggest that. There's also my little tome, my little book, Black Women Bringing It All Back Home. And then Africa. People forget about Africa. The most impoverished continent in the world, the wealthiest continent in the world in terms of resources. And Africa made a huge contribution to the world in Tanzania with Ujamaa under President Nyerere. The hidden story of Tanzania's socialist villages. A lot of people don't know about this great contribution of Africa. So we have a book list. If we have to run out, please circulate the book list so you can order it from us, because we're out of time and we didn't have a table. But somebody asked about.
If we order from you, do you get some kind of proceeds as opposed to if we ordered off of Amazon?
Yeah, if you're ordering it from our book list, yeah, because then Amazon gets it.
So
So somebody asked about advice for the students, who are facing survival issues. And the sister talked about dealing with trauma. And I think the only thing to say about that is that we agree, because in a lot of our work included in it is, dealing with trauma, because there's a lot of it going on, and self-care and that sort of thing. And the other sister gave some information about welfare. Does anybody want to comment quickly on any of those things? So,
I just want to address you, sister. As another human being and mother, and who has been in prison for the struggle, we don't give up. Don't give up and say, what can we do? Because if I'd have gave up, or if I'd have took the opportunity that some people tried to put in front of me, but I knew what my struggle was. And we do have to use the word struggle because that's what we're doing here, is struggling. And
right.
there is an end to the madness. My grandchildren, my great-grandchildren will benefit from what their grandmother done. I benefit from my grandparents. I benefit from my parents, my father and my uncles and everybody that was out in the struggle. You know, so the struggle may seem long for us, but I'm telling you at the end, we're gonna win.
I respect the
We
struggle.
have to win. Yeah, hang on, sister.
Yeah, I won't use that word.
Well, that's you, but she doesn't agree. The sister over here that asked about the college, the college stuff, we don't have time, we could talk about it a little bit more. I wanted to say that some of us, we've been gathering in that little space right at the end of the hallway, and I think around, we'll have a little time, I think around, what's on that schedule? I made it this morning and I can't remember. Is it 3 o'clock today or 4 o'clock today? Eric, what's on that paper?
Yeah, 4 o'clock.
At 4 o'clock, we're going to be over there with some of the literature. We can discuss more informally with you all, right? Since we have to get out right down the hallway on the right side, you know, the little lounge area. So let's talk about it and get involved with the Poor People's Campaign. Go on to their website. This is a hopeful time, everybody. It's a hopeful time. Black Lives Matter, Poor People's Campaign. We can do it. We can do it. Thank you.
I'm gonna put these back.